The History of the British Empire Part 7. The empire expands across the world. The loss of the American colonies in 1783 marked the end of one chapter in British history, but it also marked the beginning of another. Rather than retreating from overseas expansion, Britain redirected its attention toward regions that promised even greater opportunities. The empire would no longer be centered on North America. Instead, its future would lie across the vast oceans of Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. The Royal Navy made this transformation possible. With France weakened after years of war and Spain struggling to maintain its colonies, Britain faced fewer serious naval rivals. Merchant fleets traveled farther than ever before, connecting London with distant ports across the globe. At the center of this new expansion stood one organization, the British East India Company. Originally created as a commercial enterprise, the company had evolved into something far more powerful. It maintained its own army, collected taxes, signed treaties, and governed millions of people across the Indian subcontinent. Few private companies in history have ever exercised such extraordinary authority. Following the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and later victories throughout India, the East India Company steadily expanded its influence. Local rulers often found themselves forced to choose between cooperation and military defeat. Some accepted British protection, others resisted. Those who opposed the company usually discovered that its disciplined armies and modern weapons gave Britain a decisive advantage. By the beginning of the 19th century, British influence stretched across much of India. The country soon became the most valuable possession in the empire. Cotton, silk, tea, spices, indigo, opium. India supplied Britain with enormous quantities of valuable goods, while also serving as a vast market for British manufactured products. It quickly earned the nickname, the jewel in the crown. Yet Britain's ambitions extended far beyond India. Far to the southeast, another opportunity emerged. In 1788, the first fleet arrived on the eastern coast of Australia carrying hundreds of convicts, soldiers, and officials. Britain had previously transported many prisoners to the American colonies. After American independence, a new destination was required. Australia became that destination. The first permanent settlement was established at Sydney Cove. Life there proved incredibly difficult. Food shortages, isolation, unknown wildlife, harsh climates, disease. Despite these challenges, the colony survived. Over the following decades, free settlers joined the growing population, and Australia gradually transformed from a remote penal colony into one of Britain's most successful overseas possessions. Across the Tasman Sea, Britain also increased its interest in New Zealand. British explorers, missionaries, and traders had visited the islands for many years. As European settlement expanded, Britain negotiated the Treaty of Waitangi with many Maori chiefs in 1840. The agreement placed New Zealand under British sovereignty while promising protection for Maori lands and rights. Although disputes over the treaty would continue for generations, it became one of the defining moments in New Zealand's history. Meanwhile, Britain's commercial ambitions in Asia continued growing. One location proved especially important: Singapore. Founded by Sir Stamford Raffles in 1819, the settlement occupied one of the world's most strategic positions. Ships traveling between India and China passed directly through the nearby Strait of Malacca. Within only a few decades, Singapore became one of the busiest ports on Earth. Merchants from Europe, China, India, and Southeast Asia gathered there to exchange goods worth millions of pounds every year. Trade had become Britain's greatest weapon. Rather than conquering every territory directly, Britain often relied on ports, naval bases, and commercial agreements. This strategy allowed the empire to influence regions far larger than those under formal British rule. At the same time, Britain's explorers continued charting unknown parts of the world. Captain James Cook had already mapped much of Australia and New Zealand during the late 18th century. His voyages inspired further expeditions across the Pacific. British ships surveyed coastlines, discovered new islands, and produced increasingly accurate maps that strengthened Britain's naval dominance. Exploration and empire went hand in hand. The better Britain understood the oceans, the easier it became to expand trade and establish new colonies. Throughout the early 19th century, another dramatic conflict reshaped the empire: the Napoleonic Wars. After the French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power and sought to dominate Europe. Britain once again found itself fighting its oldest rival. The struggle lasted more than a decade. While massive battles took place across the European continent, the Royal Navy fought a different war at sea. British fleets blockaded French ports, captured enemy merchant ships, protected trade routes, and seized valuable overseas colonies. The defining moment came in 1805. Off the coast of Spain, the Royal Navy encountered the combined French and Spanish fleets near Cape Trafalgar. Commanded by Admiral Horatio Nelson, Britain launched one of the most famous naval attacks in history. Instead of following traditional tactics, Nelson divided the enemy line into separate sections, overwhelming them one by one. The battle ended in complete British victory. Although Nelson was killed during the fighting, his triumph secured Britain's control of the seas. For the next century, no navy would seriously challenge British maritime supremacy. After Napoleon's final defeat in 1815, Britain emerged stronger than ever. At the Congress of Vienna, Britain received several new overseas territories. Malta strengthened British influence in the Mediterranean. Mauritius expanded Britain's reach across the Indian Ocean. The Cape Colony became a vital stop for ships sailing between Europe and Asia. Trinidad, Tobago, St. Lucia, and other Caribbean possessions further increased Britain's wealth. Each new colony strengthened the empire's growing network. Together they formed a chain of naval bases stretching across the globe. British ships could now travel almost anywhere while remaining supplied and protected. By the middle of the 19th century, Britain's empire connected every major ocean. Its merchants dominated global trade. Its navy protected international shipping. Its industries produced goods for markets around the world. Many foreign observers began calling Britain the workshop of the world. Yet beneath this remarkable success, new challenges were beginning to appear. Industrialization transformed Britain into the world's leading economic power. But rapid expansion also increased political tensions. Many colonies demanded greater autonomy. Competition from other European empires intensified, and unrest within India was slowly growing. The empire appeared stronger than ever before, but events soon unfolding in India would force Britain to completely rethink how its greatest colony should be governed. Part 8: The Jewel in the Crown and the Height of British Power. By the middle of the 19th century, the British Empire had become the world's greatest global power. Its merchant ships crossed every major ocean. Its industries supplied markets on every continent. Its navy protected international trade routes stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. No other nation possessed such an extensive network of colonies, naval bases, and commercial ports. Yet at the center of this vast empire stood one territory above all others: India. For decades, the British East India Company had ruled much of the subcontinent. Although officially a trading company, it exercised powers normally reserved for governments. It collected taxes, maintained its own army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, negotiated treaties, and controlled enormous territories. Millions of Indians now lived under company rule, but resentment was growing. Many Indian rulers had lost their kingdoms. Traditional industries struggled under new economic policies. Religious and cultural tensions increased as British influence expanded into everyday life. The situation finally exploded in 1857. Indian soldiers serving in the East India Company's army known as sepoys rebelled against their British officers. The immediate cause involved new rifle cartridges rumored to be coated with animal fat, forbidden by both Hindu and Muslim religious traditions. For many soldiers, this represented the final insult after years of growing dissatisfaction. The rebellion spread rapidly. Cities across northern India rose against British rule. Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi, entire regions fell into rebel hands. For a time, it appeared that British authority in India might collapse completely. The fighting became extremely brutal. Both sides committed terrible atrocities. Entire towns were devastated. Thousands of civilians lost their lives. British forces eventually regained control after months of intense fighting. Supported by loyal Indian troops, reinforcements from Britain, and the overwhelming strength of the Royal Navy, by 1858, the rebellion had been crushed. Its consequences were enormous. The British government concluded that the East India Company could no longer govern India effectively. After more than 250 years of existence, the company was dissolved. Responsibility for India passed directly to the British Crown. A new period had begun. Known as the British Raj, India became the empire's most valuable possession. A viceroy was appointed to govern on behalf of the monarch, while thousands of British civil servants managed one of the largest administrative systems in the world. Railways expanded across the country. Thousands of kilometers of track connected distant cities for the first time. Telegraph lines improved communication. Modern ports increased international trade. Large irrigation projects transformed agricultural production. British officials argued these developments modernized India. Many Indians, however, believed the infrastructure primarily served British economic interests by making it easier to transport raw materials to ports for export. Despite these disagreements, India's economy became deeply connected to Britain's industrial system. Cotton supplied textile factories in Lancashire. Tea plantations expanded in Assam and Darjeeling. Jute, coal, wheat, and countless other resources flowed toward British markets. India truly became the economic heart of the empire. In 1876, another symbolic event emphasized its importance. Queen Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India. The title reflected Britain's belief that India stood at the center of its imperial identity. While Britain strengthened its control in Asia, another race was unfolding elsewhere. Africa. European powers increasingly competed for influence across the continent. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and Italy all sought new colonies. Historians would later describe this period as the Scramble for Africa. For Britain, several regions held particular importance. The Cape Colony served as a vital naval station connecting Europe with Asia. Egypt controlled access to one of the world's most valuable waterways, and East Africa offered growing commercial opportunities. Everything changed in 1869. That year, the Suez Canal officially opened. For the first time, ships could sail directly between Europe and Asia without traveling around southern Africa. The journey became thousands of kilometers shorter. The canal quickly became one of the most strategic locations on Earth. British trade with India depended upon it. Recognizing its importance, Britain purchased a major share of the canal's operating company before eventually occupying Egypt in 1882 to secure the route. Although Egypt remained officially part of the Ottoman Empire, Britain now exercised enormous influence over its government. Further south, British influence continued expanding. Missionaries established churches, merchants opened trading posts, engineers built railways, settlers founded new towns. In southern Africa, however, expansion brought Britain into conflict with the Boer republics established by Dutch-speaking settlers. The discovery of gold and diamonds dramatically increased tensions. Control of these valuable resources became a matter of national importance. The resulting conflicts would eventually lead to the Boer Wars, among the empire's most difficult colonial struggles. Despite these growing challenges, Britain reached the peak of its global influence during the late 19th century. The empire covered nearly 1/4 of Earth's land surface. Almost 1 out of every 4 people in the world lived under British rule. English became the language of international trade. British manufactured goods filled markets around the globe. The pound sterling became the world's leading international currency. London emerged as the financial capital of the world. Perhaps nothing symbolized Britain's global reach better than its communication network. A vast system of underwater telegraph cables connected Britain with nearly every major colony, known as the All Red Line. Messages that once required months to deliver could now travel across the empire. In only a few minutes, the world had become smaller than ever before. At sea, the Royal Navy remained unmatched. New steam-powered ironclad warships replaced traditional wooden sailing vessels. Advanced naval technology ensured Britain continued controlling the oceans during the Industrial Age. Foreign observers often summarized Britain's position with the simple phrase, "Britannia rules the waves." By the dawn of the 20th century, the British Empire stood at the height of its power. Its influence reached every continent. Its economy dominated international trade. Its navy protected global commerce. Its colonies supplied raw materials from every corner of the world. To many people, Britain's supremacy appeared permanent. Yet beneath the surface, powerful forces were already beginning to reshape the international order. Germany was rapidly industrializing. The United States had become an economic giant. Japan was emerging as a modern military power. Nationalist movements were growing throughout the empire. The century ahead would bring challenges unlike any Britain had ever faced. The empire had reached its greatest height.